my application got chosen, out of 1,200, they pulled my app. So I think that had something to do with it. Well, the first 2 rounds, I knew instantly. They told me right away, okay, I'm going to push you to the next round. Did a little bit of college, but don't have any degrees or like formal education. I've never done a cold call before. The mock interview was the first time I had to do a cold call, where somebody was watching.
I'm really excited this week to speak with Kyle, who just broke into tech sales at Owner.com, the #1 company on RepView right now, and one of the fastest growing startups in the world. You're gonna get a ton of value out of this conversation because not only did Kyle break in without a college degree, but he also broke in on a job listing that literally had over 1,200 applicants on LinkedIn. We're gonna dive into everything from the things he did to make himself stand out and get an interview in the first place, and also some of the tactics and things that he did particularly well towards the middle and final round interviews in such an intensive process, one of the most intense we've ever seen. Lastly, before we dive in, there are timestamps below if you do want to jump around. And also, we did recently start a newsletter where every week we're going to send out our top jobs that we like, whether it's in person, remote, hybrid, etc. So if you're trying to break into tech sales and you want job alerts every week, feel free to check out the link in the description. Nonetheless, Kyle, this was an amazing conversation. I know everyone's going to get a ton out of it. Really appreciate your time and congrats to you again.
Hey everyone, really excited to speak with Kyle this week, who recently broke into tech sales at Owner.com, which by the way is the #1 company right now on RepView. It's absolutely blowing up, huge growing startup. So really excited for you. Kyle, I would love you to maybe set the stage for everyone watching today of your background and where you were before ultimately breaking into tech sales.
I worked at a home improvement company. So it was, face-to-face selling, not tech, not selling any software, nothing like that. It was, I'm out there selling people a new roof, new siding, new windows, whatever it may be. So that was my first real intro to sales. But before even that, I was working at a restaurant. So a couple different restaurants throughout my career. That was really like how I started, my first couple jobs as, high schooler to, in college. I was working at a restaurant. But I did a little bit of college, but don't have any degrees or like formal education. Don't have any certifications. It was just, try a couple classes here, try this, try that. Didn't really find anything that spoke to me. And then I found sales, by just randomly applying on Indeed one day, got into that home improvement space selling, and then met somebody actually in one of the appointments I had. So I went to a guy's house trying to sell him windows, and then he worked in tech sales. So he was one of the guys that actually put this idea in my mind. Now he works for Zoom. He's at the mid-market account executive level. But he was working for a couple other companies before when I met him originally. But he told me, he's like, man, you should be doing tech sales. Like you have the way you're selling, the way you're communicating everything. Like you definitely thrive in this atmosphere. And then, told me all the benefits of it's remote. He's like, man, even in one of my worst year, he was doing this for 10, 15 plus years. But he's like, my worst year, I haven't made under $100,000. He's like, I'm able to support my whole family. My wife doesn't have, a job. It's just me supporting my entire family with tech sales. And he didn't have any college degree either. So, talk with him. And then really 6 months went by. I didn't think anything of it. And then eventually I started doing my own research, and I kept hearing, more and more people that are in tech and just the benefits, and, people traveling the world, working out of their Airbnb, throughout the week. And then I hit him up 6 months later, and I was like, hey man, I don't know if you remember me, but I was the guy trying to sell you windows. And he's like, oh yeah, of course, let's hop on a call. And he helped me. He gave me that initial boost of, helping me with my resume, LinkedIn. He was my very first connection on LinkedIn. So I had no profile picture, nothing. And then did that. And then like everybody else did, just the mass application where you just apply to 30, 40, 50 places, and then you don't hear anything for a couple of weeks. And then I eventually was on YouTube, okay, I need to get a little more dialed in with this process. And then that's how I found you guys, just on YouTube, random, I think it was one of your success story type things. You're one of your past students. I was listening to that, listen to a couple, and then I was like, you know what? If I invest a little bit into myself, then that's how I know I'm going to take it that much more serious. And that was really my start and how I found you guys.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that was going to be part of my next question too, is maybe speak to, for someone on the outside looking in, right? you go about it, you decide this is what you want, and you start doing and failing on your own. Whether it's, lessons you learned about that, and or sharing your perspective as to why you ultimately chose to purchase training and invest in yourself. Maybe just walking through that process a little bit more for someone on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I think it's important to try a little bit on your own, just so because sometimes if you just go straight into it, you don't almost like respect the process. You got to fail a little bit first to know, like, all right, this kind of sucks, not knowing like how to get in, because applying and then not hearing anything, and you see on LinkedIn, you apply, and then I had the trial of like the premium LinkedIn, and it'll say 750 people applied for this job, 300 in the last 24 hours. You're like what the heck, how am I supposed to compete with that? And then it'll show like 60% of applicants have a bachelor's degree. So I'm sitting there thinking like, oh, I'm never gonna, even whether it's actual a human looking at all 1,000+ applicants, or if it's like an AI or whatever it is, there's no way I'm gonna get picked. So I wanted to find ways to separate myself. So I think that's, if people go through the process and then they just basically, it's almost like you're grinding for almost, it feels like nothing. There's no like way to do it. And then I was able to find like the proper way from you guys, the cold outreach, have an actual system, basically treat it like a sales process versus it's not like applying to a job.
I love it. Well, obviously you're super successful breaking into like the top rated company on RepView. So whatever you're doing, you're crushing it. I'm curious too, like whenever you decided like, yeah, I want to invest in myself a little bit, like, were you looking at different programs? Was it just higher levels? Like what drew you into higher levels to begin with? Like, was there a specific segment? You mentioned the success stories, but like, what about the success stories made you say, hey, this is something that I feel like could be different. This is something I think I need.
I think with the success stories, just seeing like people from different backgrounds, not having the formal education, not like the bachelor's or master's, whatever it is, seeing the people like that do well. And then I'm pretty competitive. So like, not like part of my ego is I watch those videos and I'm like, well, all right, I can do it too if they're doing it as well. Like, if this person can sell and get a job here, like there's no way I'm not going to get one either. So I think that's the ego side of me speaking a little bit, is like I see that and I'm like, all right, like yeah, there's no way they can do this, I'm gonna do it too. But I was checking out a couple other places, like not necessarily like courses, but just people on Twitter, just random like pages on Twitter, like sales gurus, there's a million of them out there. But I'll follow some of their advice, and it just, you almost have to put pieces together. They don't have like a true system in place, where I wanted to have like a proper, like, all right, I can do step 1, 2, 3, 4. And then for myself is, I think like most salespeople, I'm a little lazy sometimes. So I rather just spend money to like have everything in one place than having to go try to like find 20 pieces of information. I wanted to break in as fast as possible. So I think investing in myself has just made me that much more serious about the whole process.
Nice. Yeah. Obviously like and I think there's something to that, right? Like a lot of people, they think that, and even with Del, who we just interviewed like a couple of days ago, I think that there is this preconceived notion that like, oh my gosh, tech sales is the highest paid vertical in the world. There's no way that I could be breaking into this with no experience or anything else. Like there's a natural level of skepticism where people are like, is this really possible? And so I think just seeing other people do it as well, like, sure, it could be an ego thing, but I also just think it's like, it makes it more realistic when you see other people doing it who are similar to yourself or who have less experience than you. So 100% feel you there. It's something that we hear all the time. I want to circle back. Like you went through the course, obviously like you committed to it. I guess like now being on the other side of it, or even before you got the job, like was there a specific element of the course or a specific segment where you felt like this really changed the game for me? Like this is something that I started implementing and then I started getting results a lot more.
I would say the cold outreach part is because I didn't get a response from the owner though. Like on all the cold outreach I didn't get a response, but my application got chosen, out of 1,200, they pulled my app. So I think that had something to do with it. I didn't ask them directly, but first step, what I did was just started connecting with as many of the people from the company as I could on LinkedIn. And I found, like all the the managerial level and up, like people that would be recruiters, anything like that. I just connect with them on LinkedIn. And then once I connected with them, then I sent them a message based off your guys' template, and I, of course, adjusted it to fit my personality a little bit. And then also found their work emails, and then I sent like 5 or 6 cold LinkedIn messages and about 3 or 4 cold emails to different people in the company. And then I got an email back, but not from like my direct email, just from like their company, basically saying that I was chosen out of the application process. And then now the next step is to submit a 2-minute long video. So that was the first, like their first filtering process was, I didn't even get to talk to a person. I had to submit a 2-minute long video, basically answering 2 prompts that they gave. So just like how we're talking, basically I just had to submit, 2-minute long video. And then from there, I got an interview with their recruiter. And then that was like a 30-minute Zoom interview. And after that, I got pushed to the next round, which was an interview with one of the team leads, one of the sales managers, basically. And then he pushed me through to the mock cold call with another team lead, basically. Had that mock cold call, and then I got pushed through to the final round with the CRO and then the VP of sales. And then after that, that was on the Thursday. And then on Friday, they asked for my references. So they did reference calls, and I gave them a couple of references. And then I think it was on Saturday, almost a whole week went by because the references, they were playing like phone tag a little bit. A week went by, and then they asked for another reference after they spoke with one of them already. They asked for another one. I'm a previous manager. So I gave them that one, and then they spoke over the weekend. And on Monday, I got a call from one of the team leads that I initially interviewed with, and he basically offered me the job. And they sent over all the package and everything. But yeah, it was a long process. Like from my first interview to the offer, it just every day just seemed like it was kind of dragging on. But I figured like, okay, if I made it this far, and now they're asking for my references after, like I knew I got the job, but it's just until you hear the yes, you're still always kind of worried. But
really good insight too. I think to Chris's point and to what we've talked about, Owner's a really intense company. You said what, 1,200, 1,300 plus applicants. Yeah, so
that's applicants.
Yeah, they basically put you through a mini boot camp to actually break in. So that's awesome. Like little hell week there, or hell month, I guess, probably over a couple different interviews. Maybe, going through such an intense process, I think that'd be really valuable for people watching as well. I know you've talked a little bit about some of the things you did on the outreach side, kind of getting those first round interviews, but maybe speaking more to the tactics and things that you did in those later stage interviews. Whether I think you mentioned a cold call and mock call, some of these different things. Were there a couple takeaways there for someone watching this that you felt really equipped you to not only just do well, but be a candidate that was worthy of receiving an offer? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, so for the mock cold call, I did follow your guys' script. I watched on YouTube, just different couple scripts, and then, but I ultimately ended up choosing what you guys have in the course. Just you hear like, especially on LinkedIn, about all the permission-based openers and like all these fancy stuff. And then and I would try it out. It just didn't feel really natural because I don't have the formal like cold calling experience or training. I've never done a cold call before. The mock interview was the first time like I had to do a cold call, where somebody was watching. Other than that, I only practiced once I got this far in the interview, So practicing for the mock cold call was the first time I've ever like actually practiced it out loud. So I followed you guys' script, and then I tweaked it a little bit just from my like what I felt natural to me and what I would ask in like other sales calls or in-house appointments, like things that I would ask certain questions, especially about like uncovering the pain and all that stuff and the discovery questions. But other than that, yeah, I followed that. And then the biggest thing was just you have to be able to think on your feet and not pause, because that's what they're really looking for. And that's what she told me after I went the first time. It was like her feedback. She's like, it's really good. You didn't get stumped on like the objections. She's like, sometimes people just like pause, just outright don't know what to say. So and this is coming from her, you know, once people even get this far in the interview process and they still will like fumble a little bit. So I think it doesn't really matter like what you say too much. And they're not looking for like the perfect script. I think that's one of the things I was worried about is like, oh man, I gotta have like the perfect script. It has to be dialed in. But she was more so saying they're not looking for like the perfect scripting, you know, like the perfect questions. It's just, you know, at least have a framework and then don't get stumped by like a simple question or objection. She said it actually happens more often than you think. That's what she was telling me.
No, that's awesome. And I think I would love to double tap into something you mentioned there too, of if there's anything you feel like throughout this process you didn't do perfectly, but you still recovered from. Like, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, might be splitting hairs here, but I think that's such a great perspective for someone on the outside looking in of like, it does not have to go 100.0% perfect. Is there anything that comes to mind throughout this process that you didn't do optimally, but you were able to recover from throughout the interview process with owner?
Yeah, I would say funny enough, like the last round, my final interview with the VP of sales and the CRO, that one was the interview I was the least confident in. Like after ending, like all the other ones, well, the first two rounds I knew instantly. They told me right away, okay, I'm going to push you to the next round. Because I also asked the question. You know, I was just like a sales call. You gotta ask for the business. You gotta be able to close. You know, book the meeting, whatever it is. So after the end of the interview, each round of interviews, I would ask. You know, it's like, okay, you know, based off how this interview went, is there any reason why you wouldn't push me to the next round, or like, what does the next steps look like for me? You know, and then I would always ask her like a closing question to see if I'm going to get pushed to the next round. So the first two rounds, they told me on the spot. After the mock cold call, I asked her, and she laughed, but she's like, "No, I actually don't have the authority to push you through. I have to take this back, you know, with the team that you've already interviewed with, and we're going to listen to the recording and then let you know." But then the one with the VP, like I mentioned, and the CRO, that one, I don't know if I didn't. I was a little nervous, but they were just asking like some pretty like deep questions. It almost felt like they were re-interviewing me from the start. So I basically had it felt like I just restarted the whole interview process again. So I got thrown off a little bit just because I would have thought like, okay, like after going through, you know, one recruiter, two different team leads, and now this, like they would have already had some kind of understanding of me. But they just basically felt like they just took a look at my my resume like as they were on the call. So I got thrown off for sure. So that one was basically, I guess if I have any advice for people, is just don't assume that like the team is relaying all the information if you're going through all the process. So you can still talk about the things that like are important and about yourself too. So don't like undersell yourself, especially owner for them specifically is they want you to brag. They want you to talk about all your accomplishments. They want top performers. They don't want you to be humble in the interview. You know, they specifically ask you for your biggest achievements and what's you like the hardest times you've worked, sometimes that you've like won something. They want to know those things.
Nice. Well, I mean, obviously you absolutely crushed it. So huge congrats to you, Kyle. Like I think there's a lot of golden nuggets here, especially for people that are looking to apply and go through the process with owner. I think there's a lot of good stuff here. So I appreciate you coming on here and just sharing like your advice. I think, you know, you're obviously a killer. Like you made it into one of the top companies in the world in tech sales. So huge kudos on that. I guess final question, just like zooming out completely, you know, any tips for folks out there who are considering making a change like the one that you did, a pretty big transition from one vertical to the next, or for folks out there who are considering going into a boot camp like Tech Sales Ascension or higher levels, like anything you want to leave folks out there with that maybe could help them out as well?
Yeah, I think if you have any passion for sales, no matter what industry, I think at least from being in different fields, like tech sales seems like the best place to be in, at least has the biggest opportunity. That's why I originally left my past employer was, you know, there was opportunity, but it just didn't, like, I didn't feel like that's what I could see myself doing for, you know, 10, 15, 20 years. But being in the tech space, it's so broad and you have so much more freedom with things like, you know, jobs being remote, you know, and then my job before was completely commission only. So, you know, having like these tech jobs are pretty high salaries, you know, considering like I was doing commission only. So like anything would be a good salary. But I think, yeah, for people trying to break in is, of course, like the cliche advice, you know, don't give up, all that stuff. But I think it's just the most important part to me was finding the company I wanted to work for, because I had no doubt in my mind I would get a job somewhere from some company. I wasn't worried in one bit, but it's just finding the company that you actually get excited about. And that's what I was able to find with owners, reading their testimonials, like on RepView, Glassdoor, seeing like the actual customer reviews on G2. I think that's important. If you look for companies, like if you could see yourself selling that product, then you already have a little bit of excitement and passion behind it, then that's going to convey in the interview as well.
I love it, man. Well, yeah, lots of good advice in here. Again, Kyle, huge congrats. Like, you absolutely crushed it. And I mean, we're super excited just to see like your journey unfold. Like, I think you're going to be a killer over there. They're super lucky to pick you up. So appreciate you taking the time. We're going to drop your LinkedIn down below if you're not too busy with ramping and just like, doing all the work over at owner.com. Definitely hit Kyle up. Lots of good advice. And yeah, Kyle, appreciate the time. We'll let you go, but this was really, really solid. Eric, I don't know if you have any famous last words, but this was killer.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. Congrats again. And I love to see to all the points we've said, I think you've overcome a lot of the common personal objections we see. And I think it's so funny how people forget or, pending their experience that, oh, I couldn't break into tech. But honestly, things like you mentioned, having that restaurant experience, getting some commission only sales experience was still very approachable and probably even more relevant, putting you in a great position where owner is selling to a lot of small business owners, certainly focused on the restaurant space. Like, that is an advantage that you have. So yeah, love to see it. Congrats, man. And really excited to see what the future has for you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, guys.